Welcome back to the Black Hills and Eastern Railroad, everybody. You guys might remember a little bit ago I was talking about an SD40-2 that a buddy of mine sent back from Australia. For my own personal use here, this is an SD40-2 by Kato that I painted for DM&E about 100 years ago. This is an SD40-2 which represents a former Milwaukee unit, and it's got the short fuel tank under it. And the way I did that was using a Kato SD38-2 frame. Today's episode, we are going to install Tsunami sound from Soundtraxx in this unit, and we are going to install LEDs and transmit the light to the light lenses using this fiber optic 1.5 millimeter fiber optic cable.
Welcome back to Black Hills and Eastern Railroad,
bringing back the Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern Railroad,
and Burlington Northern Railroad in South Dakota.
Some of you eagle-eyed viewers here may have recognized that there's some detail parts on the bench here, which I'm going to use in a subsequent episode to update this unit to more accurately represent a former Milwaukee Road SD40-2. So the first order of business here is obviously going to be to get the unit out of the box and get the shell off of the running gear here. Boxes with the shell. So you observe the typical Kato factory setup here inside of the shell. The weight bar and the two fiber optic factory LED light transmitters. Those go out to the headlight housings, and we're not going to get complicated with the UC unit. We're just going to have headlights, no ditch lights, no warning lights or step lights or anything like that. This install is going to be pretty basic. And curses, I used black electrical tape on this when I put the original decoder in. And that is a Digitrax DH121P that I had plugged in here. That's pretty old school. We're going to go ahead and remove that 8-pin plug here. Then the next order of business here is probably to undo those solder connections from the trucks here underneath. Remember, before soldering, safety first. Put your safety specs on. Then we're going to remove that Kato factory board here. I've got another project in mind for this board. I've got another engine, that CNS SD40-2, the green one, that appears to have a bad board in it. And then what you're left with here is essentially the 4 track pickup connections and the 2 motor connections, the orange wire and the gray wire. So what we are about to do here now is to set about taking this fuel tank assembly apart. Basically a shell is what it is. And we release the clips on either end, the front and the back of the fuel tank. And it sort of just falls away. We'll set that aside again. What you see here is, of course, the baffle. And then there are little spaces for the wires. You can see that right there with my index finger. And there's another one around the corner here. And then a hole up through the frame where you can route the wire up to your decoder. So we have this round speaker here. At one point I picked up from Spring Creek Trains out of Deschler, Nebraska, and 28 by 4.5. So, and we got plus and minus here. We'll have to pay attention to that as we hook that up to the decoder. And probably for ease of use, we'll just use red and black wire for that. I think normally speaker wire is purple in DCC installations, but to keep everything straight when we get on the top side of the model, we'll do red and black. So I'm going to tin my solder pads here on this speaker, which I have anchored down on a little piece of masking tape to the table here. And now that I've tinned both the positive and the negative pad, I'll go ahead and attach my wires here. I've taken the speaker off the tape here, and we'll go ahead and seat the speaker and also route the wire up through the chassis here. After some horsing around, I got that speaker seated in there and the wires routed, and then I put the fuel tank shell back on, and that looks like that fits nice and snug over there. No problem with that. Excellent. Now we're ready to turn our attention to the top side of the model here. So now it's time to introduce the decoder here. I'm using a Soundtraxx Tsunami 2 This is a TSU-PNP8 decoder. This is one of those drop-in boards. And basically what it'll do is it'll line up with the mounting pins on the top of the motor mounts here. And what I'm interested in is the actual, let's see, EMD diesel. And the reason why I got to this part number is on the Soundtraxx website. They have a finder for you. You can look up your scale and then the manufacturer of your locomotive and the exact model, and it will give you a recommended decoder installation for that particular model. And this is the one that comes up on the Tsunami, and this is the one that comes up on the Soundtraxx site. So this is the one we're going to use here this time. So with the decoder, they give you this diagram, electrical diagram of how to set up the decoder inside your locomotive and apply all the lighting functions and all that kind of thing. And then a rough guide with your sound functions and stuff as well. So we see here from the diagram that we've got, this is the front. My left side here is the front of the decoder, so that's the way we'll be applying that in the locomotive, keeping in mind that your front might be different from mine. I went ahead and off-camera shortened the motor leads provided by Kato to the top and the bottom of the motor here. And I tinned the ends, so we're ready for orange and black wire here. So again, I will tin the end of the wire here. So I've tinned my motor wire, and I don't know for sure, I don't remember here, but in all of my experience doing Athearn locomotives, it's always been the gray wire to the bottom of the motor, so we're going to run with that. We can always reverse that here if we need to. And we're going to use as little heat here as possible because we've got some very heat-sensitive components here around this part of the locomotive. And just for neatness here, we're going to put a little piece of Scotch tape to keep that wire seated on both sides of the motor here. So that does two things. That keeps the motor leads from contacting the bottom of the PC board, the soundboard, and it also keeps mechanically those contacts out of the shell's way as it's being seated down over the mechanism. So we are now ready to seat this Tsunami 2 board on the locomotive here, paying attention to which end is front. This is front on the decoder board, and this is front on the locomotive to my left here. We're going to go ahead and grab those little screws that we saved off earlier, and those go down through that motor mount. Basically, we're just reusing the same PC board mount points as the factory PC board used on this model. And then for a little while here, it's pretty paint by numbers. We're going to solder the track leads to the pads here for the track right and left on both the front and the back. And then we're going to solder the motor leads to M plus and M minus here on this side of the decoder. So a quick little experimentation here led me to confirm that, in fact, the motor plus on this locomotive is the orange wire and the motor minus is the gray wire. So we're going to go ahead and shorten these wires up and continue on with the installation here. Now it's an almost no-brainer here on the speaker installation. S minus and S plus, the work we've already done. So we solder those pads and cut the wire to length here. We're not going to get crazy about getting it exactly the length because we want maybe a little bit of slack in the wire here. So S plus is going to be our positive speaker wire, and S minus is going to be our negative speaker wire. So I decided to go about this a little different way. I'm attaching the white wire and the yellow wire directly to the PC board here, and I remembered to install a piece of heat shrink over them before I put on the resistor, and then we can move that heat shrink up over the joint there. And then we can move that heat shrink up over the joint and shrink it down over the resistor. So I'm attaching the long leg of this LED to the yellow wire to complete our circuit in the back for the lighting. And I remembered to include a piece of heat shrink that I can slide on to that leg now that we've made our joint on both the yellow and the blue wire. So that's all nice and tidy there. And we will shrink that up with our soldering iron here. So I've got my 1000 ohm resistor soldered in line here. I've tinned this LED leg, the short leg, and I'm soldering that to the white wire. And I'll solder the blue wire to the long leg. I have made sure I've got a piece of heat shrink on that blue wire before I make this joint here. And we're going to, just for safety's sake, make sure that we've tinned this blue wire as well. And then we're going to shrink that heat shrink down. Again, not trying to make a watertight joint, but just trying to make it tidy here. After doing a little bit of thinking about this project, I decided not to do the 1.5 millimeter fiber optic here. Instead, I'm just going to use the factory light bars that are here in this locomotive. And what I'm going to do is basically very similar to what I would have done with the fiber optic, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick this is 3/16 heat shrink that I'm going to go ahead and use, and these fit over the factory light bars pretty perfectly in this Kato locomotive. I'm going to fit it over both the front and the back, and I'm going to pay attention to which lights I have here. I have the yellow wire is the back of the locomotive, or the back headlight, and the white wire is the front of the locomotive. And I'm going to stick those down into those heat shrink tubings. And I'm very carefully going to go ahead and shrink that tubing up a little bit to that LED that I stuck down in there. And I mean, the fiber optic would have been a good choice here had I not had those factory light bars in there or had space concerns inside this shell, but I really don't at this point. So I'm trying not to linger over any one spot here with the soldering iron on that heat shrink. And I think we're probably good to go here. So in that first attempt of getting that shell fit down over here, I discovered that this weight bar, this factory weight bar in the Kato locomotive, is not allowing the shell to fit down over that Tsunami 2. And I think I've run into that in the past and had to omit that, that factory part. So we'll just go ahead and sit the shell down over the mechanism, and it fits fine now. So I guess out to sanity test and back to the programming track. So as George directs, the locomotive has been on the main line for quite some time, charging that current keeper up, and it's time to get started with Decoder Pro, where I am here, and I am going to go ahead and say new locomotive, and I am going to read type from decoder, even though I know what decoder's in the locomotive. I'm going to change this to the long address and give the long address that I desire, 6361. And I'm going to hit write changes on the sheet here. We're going to go over to the sound tab and hit read full sheet here as well. And we're going to change some things on this page. And here's where we select 567, that's in your GP9s and your early switchers. SD9s, things like that. We want the EMD 645 Turbo. There's no choice between dual would be, see, you've got a DD40. We only have one prime mover in this locomotive, and our air horn, I'm really not sure what we've got here. We'll go ahead and select an Nathan P3 there because I really do not know. I'm going to enable the grade crossing bell, and we're going to go ahead and hit write changes on the sheet here. And then we're going to skip over to Sound Levels tab, and I'm going to hit read full sheet here. So here we are with all the items read on this sheet, and the first thing that I'm going to do is turn the master volume control down and write that change on the sheet. I don't really see anything else on this page that I'm concerned with. Maybe even down a little bit more. And then I'm not sure if I'm interested in anything on this sheet. Function map. Lights is what I'm really wanting to know about. And I'm going to hit read full sheet here. I'm going to go ahead and select the reverse directional control on the forward headlight here just for the fun of it, see what that does. And write changes on that sheet. That's for the F0. F0 forward and F0 reverse. Probably going to check that as well there. And I think that's for right now, all I'm going to do on this. I think for the time being, that's enough Decoder Pro for this locomotive. We're going to go out on the main line and see how this works. So the last step here of this job is to replace the draft gears. Let it be noted that I'm using a long shank coupler for the front of this locomotive. In fact, I should check my coupler heights here before I release this engine back to service to make sure that that is an okay pulling face height. Maybe the SD38-2 is a little different than the SD40-2, but they're almost always a little low if you use a regular set coupler. So that looks good to me. We're a SD40-2 body on an SD38-2 frame here from Kato USA. Stay tuned for another episode here. I'm going to do some cosmetic modifications to this engine to make it a little bit more specific to an ex-Milwaukee unit. I hinted at that at the top of the episode here. Hope you enjoyed the content here. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and hopefully I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, everybody.